Hey, let's make some character concept art using Daz3D today. I'm starting in Pinterest here. This is my Jetta board, and here I like to pin outfits, poses that suit the character, and my model for said character. I do choose a real-life person to base my characters off of, sort of a muse or loose reference. Sometimes I'll do a realistic painting, but most of the time I'm just picking the features I like and stylizing them so it's not exact. I also like to pin random things that are just the character's vibe. Jetta's color palette is usually purple or like electric neon bluish, and she's our cyber gothic femme fatale princess, so you'll see snippets of that in here. So what I normally do is download my favorite images to a character reference folder and create a mood board using a tool called PureRef. This is one of the ways I work, not the only way. I will add that best practice is probably to use more than one source of reference, but when I want something quick and dirty, Pinterest is definitely my main squeeze. I'm sure there are those that will say it's bad to use only Pinterest, but honestly, if you just want to do a quick character reference or concept, it's pretty great. The algorithm is literally scary. I'll load Pinterest and want to pin everything in sight and completely forget why I went to Pinterest in the first place. So I already had a mood board set up. I'm just downloading a couple extra things and then we'll get to work. So this is my PureRef board for Jetta. I basically throw in the face, hairstyle, outfits, vibe images, like she would super have a flash drive disguised as a Chanel lipstick. There's a couple props on the bottom left. She's a counter sniper specialist, so she's got to have her sniper rifle and her little scanny wearable. I'm just throwing in the pose we're going to be working with today. I tend to choose high fashion editorial vibe images for Jetta. So what's this PureRef we're talking about anyway? Let's go to pureref.com. You can donate, but it is a free tool. It's essentially a mood board canvas, and you can just drag and drop images and resize them and crop them and save it out. It's pretty great to have all your reference in one place, like the site says. Next, we're going to look at Daz3D, which is the main event. It's kind of like Unreal Engine in that it's essentially a compositing software. I have no idea how else to describe it. Basically, it comes with a free mannequin that you can pose however you want. It has some free clothes, props, and environments as well. There's also a massive marketplace with zillions of assets where you can actually create your own character how you want it to look, with hair, makeup, outfits, actual characters, not to mention vehicles, environments, creatures. It is madness, a massive rabbit hole energy here, just so you know. Warning you ahead of time. You can see some of the really cool characters that users have created. It's really astounding, some of the things on here. So let's open up Daz3D. The first thing you should see is the Smart Content tab. If not, you just have to click on these teeny little arrows to pull out the menu, or you can click on the menu tab itself. In the Smart Content tab, we will see a long list of assets, and we want to click on Figures, which will bring you to the characters, and you can see a bunch that I have here I've downloaded for the Stellar Babes, but today we're going to work with Genesis 8, which is free. Double-clicking that will bring you to the assets within the Genesis 8 pack, so double-click Figures again to get the mannequins. Then double-click on Genesis 8 Basic Female or Male, depending on what you want, and there we have our Stellar Babe. Side note, I've included a link to a good installation tutorial for Daz. I wanted to keep this more conceptual and speedy and not long and technical and boring and step-by-step, just so you know. So this panel where the model appeared we call the viewport. I'm actually in front view, you might not be, but at the top right of this panel you can see a drop down that changes how we look at the scene in the viewport. I'm going to change this from front to perspective, which is generally what you want to work in. Again, at the top right of this panel, there's a vertical list of icons starting with rotate, which will let us rotate around the scene. The next is pan. It's sort of a four-directional arrow, which will move from side to side. And then we have zoom in and out. And the last two here will help you frame your model or move the viewport camera to focus on your model or whatever you have selected in the scene. If you get lost, which you will, more on that later. So let's put some clothes on this scale before we get in trouble. You should still have the Genesis 8 Assets pack open, and we're going to move down the list from figures down to wardrobe. There's not a ton to choose from here. I'm just choosing the underwear so that we can see most of the anatomy and get a good reference. Make sure you have your model selected in the Scene tab on the right before you start clicking on any clothes to dress the character. You can change the color of an asset by going back to the Scene tab, and you have to expand the character asset by clicking this little arrow because the clothes and props are appended like children. Select the item you want to recolor, then go back over to the Asset menu and click Materials. Then you gotta scroll through a million materials until the asset you want shows up in the color you want. I'm gonna choose black here. Now I'm gonna click the Smart Content tab again to free up more real estate here and set up my Pure Ref beside Daz so we can work efficiently. Now we're going to set up a 2-panel view in the viewport by going to the top left of the viewport window and right-clicking, well, Viewport, the tab. Select side by side and that will split the window in two, and we can select a different viewport for each window. Next we'll select the desired view for the window on the right. I'm going to choose front, but you can choose whatever you want. Then we'll go to the toolbar at the top and choose this cute little camera icon. You'll get a pop-up asking for more input. You can give it a name here. We want to choose the second to last option here that says Apply Active Transforms with Front View in brackets. This is the view we just set in the viewport. This will ensure the camera is placed exactly in front view like we set in the viewport, and that we can move the camera around afterwards. Now we're going to leave the front view on the right alone and work in the window on the left in perspective view. Once we zoom out, you can see the camera we just made. It's in rotate mode, which is indicated by the 3 ellipses in different colors. If we want to move the camera instead of rotate, we just have to go up to the toolbar at the top, again, and choose the 4-pointed arrow with the little arrow on top. This is the move tool. Now we can move the camera around and we'll see the changes on the right. Oh, wait, no we won't. We actually have to change the view on the right side and select the camera we just made instead of front view. Now when we go to move the camera around in perspective view on the left, we will see the changes on the right. The window on the right basically represents our final image that we'll render out. So I'm just going to swish the camera around a bit here to match my reference image as best I can. Just a sidebar note here that I don't usually always work with a reference image. I'm usually doing this because I can't find the pose I want online. But in order to keep this snappy, I'm using a reference here. Plus I like the pose. The reason this is helpful, even with reference though, is that we can now render out any angle of this pose that we want. We can do back, side view, or do a full-ass animation style 8-pose turnaround, not to mention crazy perspectives, which is really hard to do from imagination, obviously. This is super useful. It may seem like a lot of setup, but the payoff is very worth it, I can assure you. So at this point, it's all about rotating. Limbs, head, fingers, rotate, rotate, rotate. The rotate tool is at the top next to the move tool. It's sort of this circular arrow with another arrow superimposed on top. These icons are weird. The way I normally work is simply clicking on the part of the body I want to rotate and using the ellipses in the direction you want to rotate. This is kind of tricky and it's going to take some messing around to figure out what does what. This group of ellipses, or when you're using the move tool, it's arrows, is usually called a gizmo in 3D software, and it's usually labeled XYZ. You'll notice these aren't labeled. Honestly, every 3D software likes to reinvent this wheel. To me, it should be X side to side, Y up and down, and Z front to back, like we learned in algebra geometry back in school, right? But 3D fam want to be quirky and cute, and they all have their own ideas. I'm sure there's a reason for this, but rather than f with that, let's just keep it simple and go red, green, and blue and intuitively choose the ellipses in the direction we want to rotate. I expect we'll pull out less hair. You'll notice I'm constantly rotating the view around as well so I can see what is happening at all angles. You don't want to make it all perfect in front view only to turn it around and then the foot is pushing through the crotch or something, so keep rotating around. Quick bonus, let's change the expression to match too. We want to zoom in and right-click on the Viewport tab to change the single view. We can change it back exactly as before. On the right, we want to make sure we have the Parameters tab selected. On the Parameters tab, you want to make sure Pose Controls is selected. Then go to the search bar at the top of the panel and search Eye. This is going to greatly narrow down what we're looking for, which is the upper eyelid up-down parameter. Then we can move the slider around to get the up and down movement. And to change the way her eyes are looking, we need to scroll down this list and find the eyes up-down parameter. Again, we can slider that around to change the direction of her gaze so she's looking down at us. I'm also going to change the mouth. So we'll just go back up to the search bar and hit X to clear the search, and then type in mouth, then scroll down to find the mouth open and slider that around. You can see there is a stupid amount of parameters in here, so you'll have to put on your explorer pants and give that a whirl. I'm not going to go into every single one here, obviously. So we'll continue rotating and rotating for days. I'm just going to work on the fingers and feet here until we get a good likeness to the pose reference. I'm setting up another camera for a back view of the same pose, so you can see how useful this is for character concept sheets and turnarounds. I've right-clicked on the Viewport tab and selected a 2 on the right, 1 on the left viewport setup, so I can have the front and back camera views on the right, and then work in the perspective view on the left. Bigger screens will benefit here, obviously. I'm on a 27-inch, so this is pretty much the limit. The same process goes as before, adding cameras, making sure to set the viewport to the camera you want to see, and then moving the camera around in the perspective view to get the shot you want. I find this extremely satisfying and fun to do for some reason. I don't know. Render time. So now we want to go back over to the left and select the Render Settings tab. I'm going to go over 2 basic things here, but for more details, I've linked 2 great tutorials on render settings. It's an annoyingly finicky subject. First, we want to set the dimensions and aspect ratio of the camera so it renders out the correct image size. Start at Dimension Preset, where it should be set to Active Viewport by default. I'm just going to keep this simple and select Full HD, which will give us a standard 1920 by 1080 pixels. However, since our poses are tall and skinny like a portrait, I'm going to change aspect ratio from 16:9 to 9:16, which just flips it to 1080 by 1920. Lastly, you'll want to go into the progressive rendering and adjust the max samples. I have a 3090 graphics card, so the default of 5000 samples renders in a few seconds for me, but if your renders are taking forever, you'll want to adjust this to maybe somewhere between 200 and 500, but play around, and please also refer to the render settings tutorials I've linked in the description. I should have done this earlier, but I'm going to save here. The file type is DUF or DUF. Another quick bonus here, if you go up to where we normally set the viewport view, you can click this little striped beach ball icon and change the render style in the viewport. You can do wireframe, solid clay, or shaded like we've been using all this time. You can also get a render preview with NVIDIA iRay, which is Daz3D's render engine. So you can get a sense of the final render, how it will look, and roughly how long it's going to take. And now finally we render. Go up to the top right of the toolbar and click this camera icon on the far right to render. You can set the file name and where it's going to go here. Keep in mind it won't let you do anything until it stops rendering the image. So if it's taking 10,000 years, go back to progressive render settings and slide back them samples. Now we'll save that render and head to Photoshop, the fun part. I'll just add here, if you really want, you can just take a screenshot of your image without going through the render process. I've totally done this. What's cool about this too is that it renders out transparent, so you can put a background color once in Photoshop. I even did a quick portrait view here for funsies, but yeah, you get the idea. So at this point, it's time to set up Photoshop. Use whatever size you want. I usually do 1920 by 1080, but times that by 2, and then here I cut it in half afterwards. I go to Window, Arrange, 2 up vertical to put my new Daz reference beside where I'm going to draw. Look familiar? Then we draw shit. Wow. I'm drawing Jetta in what I imagine is her party wear here. I had some fun super futzing around with her skirt pattern. I'm pretty heavily referencing the Balmain Spring 2012 look here. I love the idea of a short, tight, high-waisted pencil or A-line skirt with a slightly oversized white t-shirt. I wanted to add some heavy necklace jewelry, but needed to get this tutorial together, so unfortunately I did not have time. I also didn't do the back view in this episode, but if people want, I can totally do a part 2 where we hack together a back view from the front using the reference we made plus bonus accessories. Anyway, I really hope this was helpful and gives people some new ideas on workflow. I see a lot of people worrying about what they can and can't do in the art process, and I think it's important to empower yourself, learn new techniques, and have fun instead of stressing about what other people think of how you're doing it. Obviously, within reason, we don't want to be like completely ripping off somebody else's work and slapping it up as your own. You know what I mean, right? We're all adults here. Let me know if you liked this tutorial and if you'd like to see part 2, back view, and maybe some jewelry. If there's interest, I'll definitely make it. And in general, if you're into art, world building, vlogs, and art business type things, hit that like button and subscribe for more videos. I upload every Friday afternoon. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!